the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 20, the 2023 African Cup. This episode is part 2 on the players of South Africa. The final selections. Here we go. Hello and welcome back to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. We are back for part 2 of our mediacast on the players of the 2023 African Cup. This episode deals with the final selections of South Africa. In part 1, we compiled a list of the players and their likelihood of reaching the final squad, and that was based mostly on their participation over the past 2 years. But we did consider a couple of other factors as well. We ran out of time, actually, to do part 2 for some of the teams of the African Cup. So today we're going back to redress that and to complete the collection, as it were. The tournament has been played by this point, but we're going to take the perspective of just before the tournament here, as if we were doing the mediacast when we intended to. So this mediacast is divided into 3 sections. Section 1 is some preliminary information, including a look at games played shortly before the Cup to help us look at the lineups there. In Section 2, well, that's the main part of the mediacast, a review of the preliminary and final rosters that were released, which we'll compare to the list that we compiled in Part 1. And in Section 3, we will summarize, reviewing surprise selections and non-selections, any new players, and updating injuries. And we did have a couple remaining from Part 1 for South Africa. Then we will end with a revised version of our Spotlight review. That's our predictions of the players who we think will be starters. So with the new information we have, we will revise that. So I am working on a CAC system for my clothing here. That is closest approximate colors. And the closest approximate colors for South Africa in terms of the shirts I have is this Brazil shirt. So hopefully I will get a South Africa shirt down the road, but this is what I have to use for now. Okay, let's jump right into Section 1. Some information on the squad and games. So South Africa or teams were allowed to bring 27 players to the tournament. Actually, that was a decision in mid-December, raising it from 23 to 27. However, South Africa selected just 23 players for their final squad, and but then they put 3 players on a backup squad, 3 of the players on a backup squad there, and we'll tell you who they are. Those are all chosen from a 50-man preliminary squad that they published around December 20th. And so basically they cut 24 players, selected 3 for the backup squad and 23 for the main squad. All right, in terms of games, we're going to look at the 2 World Cup qualifiers played in November. And those were against Benin and Rwanda. We're not that interested in the scores, but we will tell you. Benin was a 2-1 home win, and Rwanda a disappointing 0-2 away loss there. So not a great start to the World Cup qualifying campaign. They did have one pre-tournament friendly in January. I actually had trouble finding information on this in the sources. My main sources didn't have information. One of them didn't even list the game. That, by the way, was a 0-0 home draw with Lesotho, also not making South African fans happy there. But we do basically have a list of the players there. So we can look and see. I'm particularly interested in those games because they often kind of give an indication as to what the starting lineup's going to be. Okay, that is the end of Section 1 then. Let's move on to the main section of the mediacast. Section 2, the selections of candidates. So we begin with the manager, Hugo Broos, and he has not been dismissed or anything before the tournament, so we'll consider him a selection, as it were, and we'll move on to goalkeepers. In part one, we did give some biographical information on these players, but in part two here, we're just interested in who made the squad. So for the goalkeepers, we had two definite candidates in Ronwen Williams and Veli Mothwa, and then a likely candidate in Ricardo Goss. So not a lot to choose from there. In fact, all three of them made it. Ronwen Williams is the captain, in fact. So Ronwen Williams, Veli Mothwa, and Ricardo Goss, the three goalkeepers, taking them through the tournament. They did actually add two players to the two goalkeepers to the preliminary squad, and the first one is Malusi Nkazimulo Buthelezi. I'll just say Buthelezi. And again, we're kind of putting them on the list here for future reference. He plays in South Africa for Orlando Pirates. And the other one is actually not new. It's Bruce Vuma. And we probably should have had him on the list in the first place because he was selected for the 2019 African Cup. He was on the bench there. And he last appeared for the national team in June 2022, following a string of 10 call-ups to the bench, 10 call-ups to the bench. But after that, was not selected because that was fairly recent in June 2022. He should have been on our list. But he is not. If he was on our list, he would have been at probably the possible but unlikely level, or even seemingly off the squad. But nevertheless, he's selected for the preliminary squad, so still in the picture to some degree. And let's look and see who played in those games. In the two November games, it was Ronwen Williams, unsurprisingly. In the Again, the information is not great here, so I kind of have to look and see who it was. It was actually Veli Mothwa starting in the game. I believed he was actually subbed out, and maybe Ricardo Goss was given a chance. Yes, that is the case. So really, as far as goalkeepers go, using that game to give them a bit of field time. Anyway, we think Ronwen Williams will be the starter, but we'll deal with that in section 3 on the Spotlight Review and move on here to central defenders. So we have quite a few candidates here. The first is at the definite level, Siandi Zulu. 2 at the likely level, Mathobi Mbala and Nkosinathi Sibisi. And then 2 at the possible level, Grant Kekana and Tapelo Zoki. We also have some at levels below that, but we will maybe do them as we go because I don't want to flood you with names here. So let's go back to the definite candidate, Siandi Zulu. He was selected for the final squad, as were the 2 likely candidates, Mathobi Mbala and Nkosinathi Sibisi, both of those selected. The possible candidates, Grant Kekana was selected also, but Tapela Zoki, one of the 3 players named to the backup squad there, so kind of not quite making it to the final team. I'm putting him in a brown highlight on the YouTube video there. To indicate the backup squad. And neither of our possible but unlikely or seemingly off the squad players even made the preliminary squad. So I'm not going to name them. And we're instead going to look at some new candidates that came into the picture. 4 of them, actually. The first one is Spiwi Given Msimango. I believe he goes by Given. No, I've seen actually on different sites Spiwi used as a first name and Given used as a first name. Anyway, he is with Kaiser Chiefs in South Africa, and again, these players we may see down the road. The second one is Ime Daniel Okon, plays for SuperSport in South Africa. Thirdly, Themba Manchiane. And finally, Siyabonga Ngazana. All four of those players have no cap. No, actually, well, I won't go into detail. Most of them have no caps for the squad. I will talk a little bit about the last one, Siyabonga Ngazana. And that's because, unlike the others, he plays outside of South Africa. He plays actually for a pretty good club, FCSB in Romania. That used to be called Steaua Bucharest, and is probably better known by that game. He also has 2 caps for the national team, earned in 2018. That was in the COSAFA Cup, but nevertheless, a bit more experience than the other 3. Anyway, that's enough of that, and let's go and look at the games to see. Maybe I'll summarize the list because it's a while since I talked about them. So definite candidate Zulu, likely candidates Miala and Sabisi, and possible candidate Kekana are the players brought to the Cup. So in the first game against Benin, it was Mbala and Zulu, so the definite and likely candidate, in a partnership, a 2-man central defense there. In the second game, Zulu and Sibisi, so the other likely candidate, paired alongside the definite Zulu. And finally, in the third game, it is Sibisi and I'm trying to see. And Zulu. So Sabisi and Zulu. So looks like maybe a rotation among the 3 of those, with maybe Sabisi playing 2 games and therefore slightly more likely than Mvala. But we'll deal with that in the spotlight review. And here move on to left back. So we had a definite candidate in Aubrey Modiba, and then 3 possible candidates, Innocent Mayela, Paseka Mako, and Bradley Cross. Let's see who made it. We have Aubrey Modiba, the definite candidate, selected for the final squad, but actually none of the others were. Bradley Cross made it to the preliminary squad, but Innocent Mayela and Paseka Mako not even making that 50-man preliminary squad. Instead, we have a new candidate who actually made it to the final squad. That is Terence Mashigo. He plays for Mamelodi Sundowns in South Africa, got his first cap in 2021 and has 5 caps for the national team. He actually started 5 games in a row in 2021, and then after March 2022 didn't appear for the national team. So kind of coming back in from the cold, Terence Mashigo, and selected for the final squad. The other one, only the preliminary squad did he make, and that is Fawaz Basadian, and he plays in South Africa as well. He's 28 years old, so not a young player who we, or less likely. I don't know what I'm trying to say there. I'm trying to say something along the lines in that he's less likely than a younger player to appear the next time around. That's what I'm trying to say. But all in all, it wasn't really worth it. Let's look at who played left back. It was Aubrey Modiba in both of the November games, and then in the January friendly, also Aubrey Modiba. So for goalkeepers, they were experimenting, but it looks like in defence, they're playing the players that we would expect to see starting in the final. Let's go on to right backs, and we have a definite candidate in Naiko Mobi. No candidates at the likely level, but 2 at the possible level, Kuliso Mudau and Thapelo Morena. We also had one at the possible but unlikely level, Thabiso Monyane. So let us see who made it. The definite candidate, Naiko Mobi, was selected for the final squad. And also both of the possible candidates, so Kaliso Mudau and Fapelo Morena, both of those selected. That's more than usual. So perhaps one of those players intended to fill in at central defence if they need it. Even our possible but unlikely candidate, Thabiso Moyane, was selected for the preliminary squad there, but didn't make the final cut, and we have no new candidates here. So let's take a look, or we'll summarize. So we have definite candidate Mobi and possible candidates Mudau and Morena. Now let's look at the games and see who played it. In the first game in November, it was Mudau rather than our definite candidate. And he also played the second game in November. Let us see the other one. It takes me a while. It's Mudau there in the January friendly also. So I'm not sure what has become of Nico Mobi there, but his position looks like it's being challenged. Again, something we'll talk about in the Spotlight review. We move on upfield to the midfield and begin with defensive midfielders. We have none at the definite or likely level, and we begin at the possible level with two candidates, Bathusu Obas and Sibongisengi Mathethwa. And then three possible but unlikely candidates, Jabulo Blom, Miguel Tim, and Mlungisi Mbujana, the three possible but unlikely candidates. Let's take a look. They are just at the possible level, and Bathusi Obas only making the preliminary squad there. And Sibongiseni Mathethwa, one of the three players making that three-man backup squad. So just short of reaching the cut there. And all of our possible but unlikely candidates were selected for the preliminary squad, but none of them for the final squad. So that is Njabulo Blom, Miguel Tim, Lungisi Mbujana, all just making the preliminary squad there. And in fact, none of our defensive midfielders have made the final squad. The closest that we get is Sibongiseni Mthethwa, brought in as a backup player. And we have no new candidates here. So it looks like our central midfielders will be playing as defensive midfielders in this tournament, but all the players coded as defensive midfielders left off the squad. Let's take a look at our central midfielders. We don't actually have that many of them. The first one is Teboho Mokoena. He's a definite candidate. And then none at the likely level, but at the possible level, Shfefelo Sithole is the candidate, and the other one at the possible level, Luc Leroux. And then one candidate, possible but unlikely, Grant Margeman. So let's see who made it. I kind of gave it away on the graphic there that Teboho Mokoena, our definite candidate, was selected. The first of the two possible candidates, Sfefelo Sithole, was selected. But Luc Leroux was not selected, even for the preliminary squad, and that seems to be due to injury. So we're going to talk about him in the section 3, the injury section. Meanwhile, our possible but unlikely candidate, Grant Margeman, making the preliminary squad, but not the final cut. Here, though, we do have some new candidates, and in fact, one of them was selected for the squad, and that is Sabana Monare, or Sabana Monaire. So he is with the Orlando Pirates in South Africa. He has 4 caps for the national team since 2015 and is 35 years old, but still um, uh, selected for the squad. So, as I said, he played one game in 2015, and then in March 2021, and 2 starts in March 2022, and that was his last appearance for the national team. So again, a player kind of brought in from the cold, Thabang Monare. Or Thabang Monair, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. 2 other new candidates just making the preliminary squad, Ethan Brooks and Goodman Moselle. Um, yes, as I said, just making the preliminary squad, and we won't go into detail about that. Let's instead move. No, now it's time to look at the central midfield. So really, not that many candidates, just 3 central midfielders. Usually this is like central defense where they bring 5 or 6, so very thin on the roster here. Let's look at the first game though. It is the pairing we expect, Teboho Mokoeni alongside Sithole. That's a 4-2-3-1 formation, so two central midfielders there. And in the second game against Rwanda, also a 4-2-3-1 formation, and it's the same pairing, Sithole and Mokoena. In the other game, Sitholo I see on the list, and Mokoena, I'm not sure what the formation of that one is. But that looks like a very solid pairing in central midfield, so we would probably expect them to start in the cup. Again, more on that in section 3. Let's move on to the upper left quadrant of the field. Well, a quick word on left and right midfielders. They have no players coded in those positions. Most teams don't now. And so it's really central midfielders covering those positions if they use something like a 4-3-3 formation. Okay, upper left quadrant of the field. This would be left wingers, left attacking midfielders, or left forwards, depending on the formation. And we had no definite candidates, but a likely candidate in Bongo Cool, Flongwain. I just have to pause to cough here. There we are. So Bongo Cool Longway, the likely candidate, and 2 possible candidates in Monopule Saleng and Pule Modi. And long story short, none of them made it. So just like central midfield, a bit surprisingly thin. So Bongo Cool Longway only making the preliminary squad, as did Monopule Saleng. But Pule Modi not selected even for the preliminary squad. Here too we have some new candidates, and one of them was selected for the final squad. That is Thapelo Maseko, making the final squad. So I'll tell you a little bit about him. He has 2 caps since 2022. He's 21 years old, playing for Mamelodi Sundowns in South Africa. Those 2 caps were COSAFA Cup games in 2022, but he did appear on the bench for the senior team in June of 2023. However, that was it. That was his only involvement before being named to the preliminary squad, and then surprisingly selected for the final squad, above the especially ahead of Longwain, who I'll talk more about at the end. The other new candidate, just making the preliminary squad, Tushapang Moremi, plays for Amazulu in South Africa there, but not making the final cut. So just one winger there brought in out of the cold, Thapelo Maseko. Let's look and see who filled the position. Well, it was our likely candidate, Longwain, in both of the November games. So it's very odd that he wasn't chosen. Again, we'll talk about it later. And Thapelo Maseko brought in for the January friendly. We're assuming it was in that position, although I don't actually have a graphic of positions. Okay, over to the right side, we do have more candidates here, though none at the definite level. We begin at the likely level with two candidates. The first is Percy Tau, and the second is Milali Mayambela. The next is a possible candidate, Elias Mokwana, and then a possible but unlikely candidate in Kobamelo Kodasang. Let's take a look and see who made it. I'm happy to see Percy Tau making the final squad. And Mihaly Mayambela also making the final cut there. Elias Mokwana only making the backup squad. So he is the third of our backup players. And that basically means he didn't make the squad, but there is a chance of him being called in later. Our possible but unlikely candidate, Kobamelo Kodasang, not selected even for the preliminary squad. So at least we have two right wingers here, Percy Tau and Mayambela. Let's see how they lined up in the games. It was Percy Tau in the first game and the second game, both November games there. And he also is on that list for the January friendly. So again, other than goalkeepers, that seems to be their first squad that we're seeing in the January game there. We move on to the forward line, but actually we begin with attacking midfielders there. And here we have no definite candidate, but a likely candidate in Themba Zwane or Themba Zwane. I'll have to watch the games carefully to see how to pronounce some of these names. Themba Zwane, the likely candidate, and then three possible candidates in Mduduzi Mdatsane or Mdatsane. Next is Oswin Apollos. Apollos sounds like apologize, which is something I should do for the way I'm pronouncing names. And the third possible candidate is Jaden Adams. So let's see who made it. Themba Zwane or Themba Zwane was selected, as we expected. And the possible candidates, the first one, Mdatsane or Mdatsane, not selected. But the other two were Oswin Apollos and Jaden Adams, both selected for the final squad there. So three players at the attacking midfield position. And maybe these players will come back and help in central defence because there's a bit of a dearth of players there. We do have a new candidate here too, and that's Patrick Maswanganyi. Patrick Maswanganyi, but just making the preliminary squad, he plays for Orlando Pirates in South Africa. So we may see him and other new players on the roster, on the preliminary roster next time around. Let's take a look though. We did see that it's a 4-2-3-1 formation, so that does involve an attacking midfielder. And in the first game, it is Themba Zwane playing in the position. In the second game, he is there also. And given that they... no, I'm going to abandon that comment I'm making because I'm not seeing his name on the list. And I'm not seeing Apollos or Adams either. So I'm wondering perhaps it was a different formation there. Okay, I do see actually Mayambela on the list. That is our right winger. So perhaps he's playing out of position in the center, or else it's a different formation. But none of our attacking midfielders in that January friendly with Lesotho. Okay, we move on. We have no secondary strikers, no players coded as secondary strikers. So we move on to our last category, the forward line. And we begin with a likely candidate in Lyle Foster, and another likely candidate in Zakhali Lapasa. Three possible candidates here, Libo Mothiba, Kanisa Mayo, and Evidence Magopa. Let's see which of them made it. Well, Lyle Foster, a bit of a story about him, but the long and short of it is he was named to the preliminary squad, but was not on the final squad. That seems to be his choice, or his club's choice. We'll talk about it more in section 3. However, the other likely candidate, Zakhali Lapasa, was selected for the final squad. Only one of the possible candidates made it, and that was the last one on the list, Evidence Magopa. But Libo Mothiba and Kanisa Mayo just selected for the preliminary squad, but not making the final cut there. Libo Mothiba, a starter in the 2019 African Cup, but not making it to this cup. We had him as a possible candidate. And that is it. We had a bunch of players seemingly off the squad, none of them making a comeback. But we do have a new player just making the preliminary squad. That is Ikram Rainers. And he plays in South Africa, actually the second player on our list with Stellenbosch in South Africa. And he played in the Kosava Cup before, but not making the final squad, the senior squad here. So let's see who lined up as the forward. And it was Evidence Magopa in the first November game. And it was Mayambela, the player we have coded as a right attacking midfielder or right winger, playing as a lone forward in that 4-2-3-1 formation in the second game in November against Rwanda. And in the last game, well, I see Mayambela here again. I'm looking for any of our other candidates, but I do see Evidence Makopa there. So even though Zakhali Lapasa is a likely candidate, it seems that Magopa is ahead of him in the pecking order, which is possible because if a candidate is often called up, but on the bench or just as a sub, we would still put them as a likely or definite candidate because the list is whether they will make the squad. So likely to make the squad or a possible candidate for the final squad. So it doesn't really speak to who's going to start. That's part of the reason we do the spotlight review, which is coming right up in section 3 here. In fact, we're moving to section 3. The first part of section 3 is basically a summary of what we have. So we have notable non-selections here. So the first is the play we just saw, Lyle Foster. There was a bit of indication that this was coming. He missed quite a few games in the lead up, and that was due to mental health issues, depression. And it seems like his club said that his selection would have been bad for his mental health. And whether he made that decision or was kind of pushed into it by his club, he was not selected for the final squad, despite being the top scorer for the team in qualification. So that's a big loss for them, Lyle Foster. But I hope his mental health concerns allow him to come to the next cup. And he was, by the way, a likely candidate, likely because we knew of this situation and that it might affect its selection here. The next one is the forward Bongo Kule Hlongwen, I think we moved him to left attacking midfielder. Regardless, it is a surprise that he was not selected. I'm not the only one who was surprised. I read an article on it that said basically the manager said there was too much competition and he was the one who was squeezed out. I don't really buy that explanation because as we saw, there were no other candidates for left attacking midfielder, and they had to bring someone in out of the cold there. So whether there was some problem with the manager, or it could be the fact that he plays for Minnesota United in the USA, and that's a long way to travel. So maybe he doesn't get over for all of the qualifying games. Or what have you. Whatever the reason is, Bongo Kule Hlongwen, a surprise non-selection there. And other than that, we just have a whole bunch of players from 2019, which is not that long ago, that were starters in that cup that were not really not considerations here at all. So it's a bit of a long list. We'll just go through some of the main players, though. Lebo Mathiba at least made the preliminary squad. He was a starter back in 2019. And Dean Furman, I think he might have been captain of the team there. No, he wasn't. But a recognizable name from the previous cup. Just a couple of others. Sifiso Hlanti, also a starter. Bule Mukwanazi, also a starter. Well, I could go on. I'll just leave it at that. There are two others, which actually kind of suggests to me, because most of these players are well into their 30s, that 2019 squad was a somewhat older squad. So over the 4 years since, they've gone through quite a revamping of the squad, and really only a couple of players left over from that 2019 squad. Surprise inclusions. Well, really, we didn't have any players at the possible or unlikely level or the seemingly off the squad level brought back in. We do have new players. Well, I guess a couple of these new players did play for the team in the past, perhaps for the minor tournaments, but we'll consider them the new players rather than surprise inclusion. So the first one, Thapelo Maseko, the left winger, brought in pretty much at the expense of Hlongwane there. The next one is a left defender, that is Terence Mashigo, and we did see he did play in 2021, so we could call him a surprise inclusion because he's being brought back. And the other one, even more so because he's 35 years old, Thabang Monare, the central midfielder, having played 4 games for the national team, two of them in 2022 in March. So actually, I'm going to move those 2 players to being surprise inclusions, Mashego and Manare. So really the only truly new player, Thapelo Maseko. Okay, let's talk about injuries. Next, recovered from injury. He was a concern in part 1, Mothobi Mbala, but he was named to the final squad. So his injury turned out to be short-term, actually. It was a groin injury, but it only lasted 3 weeks, and he was back in action for his club on December 19th, so almost a whole month there to build his fitness, and Mvala recovered enough to make the squad. All of the next players are we had them at the possible level, but it could be that their injury was part of the reason they were at the possible level, because there are a couple of players on here that I think might have had a decent chance to make the squad had they been healthy. But all of them we knew from part 1 were injured. But they were not strong candidates, just at the possible level. The first one is defensive midfielder Bathusi Obas, and He had a groin injury from mid-September right up until December 27th. I think that was the last game of the period. No, it wasn't, because he did play for his club on December 30th. So he did recover enough that he could play for his club, but probably fitness would have been a concern, because he only had one game there before the tournament was upon him. So Bathusi Obas, perhaps we'll see him next time around. He had just been a possible candidate here. More likely to have made the squad is Luke Leroux. He looked promising, but he had a hernia problem, an inguinal hernia, which is a hernia in the guts, the intestines. And he was out for a long time from the beginning of the season in September, but on December 7th. But like Albas, he did play the last game of the year for his club on December 16th. So same situation there. His fitness would have been a concern. But whereas Obas was named to the preliminary squad, perhaps in hopes of recovery, Luke Leroux was not named to the squad. So it could mean they were less hopeful of him recovering enough. Next, we have Goodman Moselle, and actually he's the last. I think I said 4, but he's the last of them. Goodman Moselle, kind of a weird situation, because he was out with an unknown injury all the way since November 2022. So that is a really long-term injury. However, the fact that he was named to the preliminary squad, Goodman Moselle, is perhaps an indication that he is close to recovery. However, after such a long-term injury and didn't play for his club any time before the Cup. Again, fitness would have been a concern, especially for him, since it was so long term. So almost a bit surprising that he was named to the preliminary squad there. Okay, that is it. That is kind of part 1 of section 3, the review. Part 2 of section 3 is our spotlight review, where we look at the candidates who we think are going to be starters. So what you see before you is what we had at the end of part 1, but we are going to revise this and based on new information that we have. So we will copy that spotlight review here from part 1 and rename it Revised Spotlight Review for part 2. Here we go. So manager Hugo Broos, yes, we didn't think he would change, so we had him in green. That means we're confident that he'll be a starter effectively. And blue means we have some hesitation. We think it's probable or likely, or but we're not fully confident about it. That's what blue means. And Hugo Broos remains in green, so we don't think he'll be changed. Goalkeeper Ronwyn Williams, that's what we had in the first one, in green. We were very confident about that. And even though he didn't start the last game and the other 2 goalkeepers were given a try, we don't think that endangers Ronwyn Williams' position. So we're going to stick with him as a starter. In central defense, it looked like a rotation with Zulu as the main central defender and either Sibisi and Mayala beside him. We actually do favor Sibisi there. In part 1, we had a little red attached to Mothibi Mayala's name because we thought he might be an injury, but that is not the case. So yes, we still think it'll be Zulu flanked either by Sibisi or Mbala. We think actually they will rotate. At left back, we're quite confident, or we were quite confident, it's Aubrey Modiba, and there's nothing there to change our mind. Modiba started all 3 games prior to the Cup, so that remains green, or we're confident Aubrey Modiba be the starter. Things have changed at the right back position, though. We did have kind of Mobi and Mudau in blue, thinking it would be one or the other or rotation. But after looking at the games, Mudau started all three. So we're going to throw our weight behind him as the starter and put him in green, although I do have a bit of reservation about that, but let's be bold. Central midfield, much more stable than most teams. Actually, not a lot of players to choose from there, but we think, or what we had at part one was definitely Mokoena and Shitholi. We thought perhaps Bathusi Obas, we had him in blue, but we're going to remove him now because he is not on the final squad. And Mokoeni or Shithole. We're not even sure who would be the backups there because those two always play. On the left wing, we had Bongo Kule Hlongwane in green. We were confident that he was going to be a starter, and lo and behold, he wasn't selected for the squad. And only one player kind of brought in, kind of out of the cold, to replace him, effectively newcomer Thapelo Maseko. We think he might be the starter. He did start the warm-up game there. So we're going to move Hongweni and put in Maseko, but just in blue, because we think there's a chance that an out-of-position player, for example, Mayambela, might come across and play the position, or one of the attacking midfielders there. So just in blue. On the right wing, we are actually, we had Percy Tau and Mayambela both in blue. We're going to change that up a bit. We think Percy Tau will definitely be a starter on the right wing. But we have seen Mayambela starting in other positions. He was the forward in the last November game against Rwanda, and we're not sure of his position on the field, but I suspect he was a forward too. No, because Magopa was there, but Mayambela was starting somewhere on the field. So we're going to actually create a special mention category for Mayambela, and we think we put him in blue, so we think it's quite possible he will be a starter somewhere on the field, but we don't think he'll be ousting Percy Tau, who seems ensconced at the right attacking midfield position. Central attacking midfield, we had Themba Zwane in green. We were confident he was going to start. We've lost a bit of that confidence because he didn't start the January friendly. And so we're going to change him to blue. We think he is likely to start, but we lost a bit of confidence in that. And for forwards, we had both in blue Lyle Forster and Zakele Lapasa. We're going to remove both of those. Well, Forster not coming to the tournament, and Lapasa not starting any of the last three games. As we said, it was Mayambela in one game, but Evidence Makopa we're going to put now as our favored candidate, but only in blue because we're not that confident about it. And then special mention, Milali Mayambela starting. We think potential to start in blue, but not sure where he will be on the field. Okay, that brings us to our revised end of our revised spotlight review, but we can do one more thing. Since the games have been played, we can actually put our predictions to the test and see how we did, because we can look at the lineup for the first game since it's been played. So here we go. Well, Ugo Bruce not fired before the tournament, so we'll consider him a starter, the starting manager. Goalkeeper Ronwin Williams, we were right in predicting him. We didn't think he was under a challenge, and the captain of the team there starts the first game. In central defense, pretty good here too. Sayandi Zulu was a starter. And then we thought it would be either Sabisi or Mvala, and a little bit against our expectations. We favored Sabisi, but it was actually Mvala starting beside him. Sabisi not starting, but we do think it's a rotation, so we expect to see Sabisi starting perhaps in game 2. Left back, no surprise here, Aubrey Modiba. We had him in green, and he did start. On the right, yes, Mobby seems to be out of the picture, at least as far as being a starter goes, and it's Kuliso Mudau who seems to have taken over the position. So we were right to change it to Mudau in green. Central midfield, well, we had little doubt that it would be a two-man central midfield with Mokoena and Shithole, and it is those two starting in central midfield. By the way, this is a 4-4-2 formation, so two central midfielders. That's what they seem to favor anyway. On the left wing, this is probably the most dubious position of all. With Hongweni out of the picture now, we had Tapelo Maseko, the newcomer, in blue, and he did start, so he has taken over the position. We thought perhaps an out-of-position player might come in there in the, well, upper left quadrant of the field. In this case, the 4-4-2, it's a left attacking winger. On the right, it is also a right attacking winger, and we were right to think that it would be Percy Tau. There's no central midfield position here, so Themba Zwane not starting as a central attacking midfielder the way he's, well, actually coded as a left winger slash left forward, but for some reason we had him as a central attacking midfield. So he did play there in the 2 November games, but didn't actually start in the January game. Here, he starts as the right co-forward, so does start on the field, but seems to be in various positions up there, depending on the formation. Also, we had gotten rid of our two guesses from part 1 and replaced them with Evidence Makopa as the most likely starter, but we weren't fully confident about it, but perhaps we should have been, because he is the starter there. And the special mention, we thought Mayambela would be starting somewhere on the field, but we were wrong on that one, because he does not get a starting position here. I actually see that he does sub in during the game for Zwane, however you pronounce his name. Okay, well, that's as far as we can take you for South Africa here, and we will see if South Africa makes the next African Cup. Lately, they're making half, even less than half of them. But maybe the overhaul team will do better here, and then we'll see them for the next African Cup in 2025. That takes place in December, so we'll be looking at the players that make the tournament in October or November. So I hope to see you then. We would like to thank Pixabay and Alexei Ivanov of Mappa Music for the wonderful background music accompanying this mediacast.